housekeeping items to start with. You'll notice that you have all been muted and you can't unmute yourself. So can you please use the chat function, which is down the bottom of the screen. If you've got any questions, and if you have questions, just address them to everyone so we can all see. But if you have any technical issues, please address your questions to Karen separately. Please use the speaker view. You can find this button at the top right. It says speaker view, which is a bit counterintuitive, but just click that anyway and it'll take you to speaker view. I will attempt to collate the questions during Marcia's presentation, and the questions will be answered by Marcia after she's finished talking. Karen will be recording and Marcia's presentation and a selection of the questions. After that, the recording will stop and you will have an opportunity to ask Marcia any general questions. Raise your hand if you have a question. You will find this function under participants, and there's a raised hand somewhere on that, depending on how your screen works. I think that's about all for that. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Dr. Marcia Leventhal to present our first weekly conversation. Dr. Leventhal holds a doctorate in clinical psychology, is a board certified dance movement therapist, BCDMT, is a certified movement analyst, CMA, and is a national certified counsellor in CC. She has been actively working to develop dance movement therapy in Australia since 1987, when she was a keynote speaker for the first dance movement therapy conference in Australia. At that time, she was sent all over the country to give workshops and lectures, and eventually out of this engagement, the IDT and the training program was born and is still going. Dr. Leventhal's theoretical contributions in the field of dance movement therapy include the integrative treatment model, the conscious healing dance, the quantum healing dance, the 5-part session, and dance therapy as a primary treatment modality. These models allow one to develop age and developmentally appropriate treatment programs for a wide variety of both clinical and non-clinical populations, supporting dance therapy with a holistic humanistic treatment model. The topic of Dr. Leventhal's presentation today is dance movement therapy, teletherapy, possibilities and problems. I shall now hand over to you, Marcia. Thank you.
Very much, Maeve. Hi, everybody. Oh, it was so nice to see so many of you that I haven't seen for such a long time. As you know, Australia is practically my second home. I think of all the years I was going there at least 4 times a year. So, wow. And then when we did the workshop last August, there were people I've worked with for over 30 years. And so they were kids, and now their kids have kids, and it's kind of amazing to have that kind of history with all of you. So this is a place near and dear to my heart. So I'd like to cover a lot of things today, and I want to go over many things that I won't be covering as well, because this is a very very topical right now, what we're talking about. This teletherapy, telehealing, long distance, using some kind of platform like Zoom or Skype or even our iPhones to stay in contact with our clinical populations, whether we're working privately or some of you are still lucky enough to be working at a center that's gone on to teletherapy. Quite a few people in the United States have that happening right now. I do not. I've been working at a prison for the last almost 4 years with incarcerated men, the highest level of incarceration. They're in pretty much solitary confinement, and they each have gotten 1 group a week for an hour and a half. Now, they would have been perfect to do teletherapy with, but because of what goes on in a prison, no cameras, no this, no that, we can't. And so I've been furloughed for the time being. We'll see what happens. But those are guys that would have been fantastic. They would have appreciated it. They wouldn't have cared if they had to watch me on some kind of satellite in the sky. They would have been happy to get out of their cells and just participate. So some of you are still lucky enough to have your populations, but I'm going to be talking about a lot of things, and I'm talking fast now because I do want to get a lot in. So before I start, Well, I started. Um, Here's my friend who he just happened to show up again today. He shows up every once in a while, so I'm going to let him say hello. I hope you can see it.
Relax, calm down now. Don't stress. Take it easy.
And I think that's something that's really important because this is the first time, probably in anybody's lifetime, that the whole population of the world, we're all on the same page. We're all having the same experiences and having the same kinds of reactions to these experiences. So truly, I think it's an amazing time for connection. I am so happy that IDTIA is going to do these weekly connecting times. And it almost doesn't matter. We're going to come together, people will move, they'll talk about what's going on, to know that we have a connection to each other. Because we are an energy field, among many other things, but energy travels. And we know it travels better than this damn virus, what's interesting is all the experts say, well, we don't really know why it's spreading so fast and we don't know how it gets spread and on, but we know a lot about energy and we have such a contribution to make to our own field and to the world at this time. So how do we stay positive when anxiety is rampant? Anxiety is another virus around us because people are losing their jobs. They don't know where their next money is coming from. The stores are out of toilet paper and they're out of all kinds of sanitary supplies. And what do we do? And then you say, okay, we have to stay connected. We have to stay centered. We have to stay grounded because that's how we keep our immune system strong. And that's how we, as dance movement therapists, will make a contribution to our own clients and as the ripple effect happens out into the world. So I would like to share with you just a couple things that I've been doing that have helped me. And also, just another aside, I just want to say that it's important to acknowledge what we are feeling. And I would imagine many of us are grieving. We're grieving the old life. And at the same time, we're having to make adjustments to the new life, to the so-called new normal. But we don't know what the new normal is going to look like. Socially, economically, psychologically, we have no idea who we're going to be. So in a way, we have to really redefine who we are, or maybe go back to that deep, authentic place and allow it to develop, evolve, and extend our boundaries even further than we already have. So I just want to share with you what I've been doing and sharing with my clients and friends, which I came to because I realized, from all the work, and we all know about mindfulness, and the bottom line of mindfulness is that it has to be the here and now without judgment. And the big thing is without judgment. So in the beginning, we've been on lockdown now at least 3 weeks in California. And before that, they were saying people of a certain age and underlying conditions, stay home, don't go out. So there's been this, time of really isolating already. So I knew the first week or so, I was really needing to rest, to sleep. And I thought, yeah, this is a time to rest and recuperate and without judgment. It's okay. And that's really important, to give yourself that permission, whatever your body is telling you to do. Because most of us have really crazy schedules. And this might be the first time in many, many years that we have this time. And I want to talk about that later, this idea of time, space. Because Einstein says, there's no time, there's only space. And yet what we find is we have time. So to rest and recuperate is the first step. And that might happen twice a day, 3 times a day. It might happen for a week. Please don't judge. And then meditate, major important. Meditate and contemplate. And they're different. I find that after I meditate, I do want to contemplate, think about things, just let my thoughts wander. And I just wanted to read you this wonderful quote from Buddha. He says, Buddha was asked, what have you gained from meditation? And he replied, nothing. However, let me tell you what I have lost. Anger, anxiety, depression, insecurity, fear of old age, and death. Isn't that beautiful? I don't know if you can see this, if it makes a difference. And we know from, there's been so much research in meditation. We won't go into that now. but meditating strengthens the immune system. And we want to do everything we can to keep our immune system strong. My first meditation teacher, I was so lucky, was Swami Rama. And Swami Rama is the Swami who came over from India, I don't know, 50, 60 years ago. And they did experiments with him at the Mayo Clinic. And from that, they developed biofeedback. And he was my first meditation teacher in New York. And he's the one that said it doesn't have to be at a special time every day. You don't have to have a special place with all your special objects. He said you can meditate walking in the street, you can meditate on the subway, etc. And well, I also want to tell you, he was very funny to us. He said, you someday will understand that this meditation takes you to deep places and you will develop skills that you didn't know you had. For instance, you can be awake and you can be sleeping and you can be dreaming all at the same time. And we said, well, what do you mean? You know, how can we do all that? He said, I did it, I learned it, and you can learn it too. Well, then tell us, Swami, how did you learn this? He said, it was very easy. I was in a cave for 6 years, and when I came out of the cave, I could do it. And of course, we all just laughed hysterically. Interestingly enough, last year, one day I realized I was awake, asleep, and dreaming at the same time. How interesting. Now, whether I have control to make that happen at will, I'm not sure, but it is definitely something. As we expand our awareness of who we are and we develop this potential in ways that our mind can't conceive of because it hasn't yet learned it, we have all kinds of skills that we're developing. So this is a time to stay very positive and realize that things that we're calling obstacles now and things that are making us anxious are probably opportunities. And that's how I see it. So rest and recuperate, meditate and contemplate, and create. You're going to be so surprised, and you probably have seen it already, that there's just all these ideas that are coming. Remember, without judgment, write them down, think about them. Maybe they're poems, maybe they're songs, maybe they're dances. I don't know what form they're going to take, but allow that creativity, that imagination to just go wild now. What a fabulous time to do that. And always remember, and I do this throughout the day many times, and I'll ask you to do it now, to breathe and to stretch. So if you would join me now, this is the breathing that I find just the most effective. And I know we all have all kinds of breathing experiences, and there's many. This is just one. I'm going to ask you to take in, going, the deep breath from deep, deep, deep in the belly and filling the lungs up to here. 6 counts. And then 4 counts, holding it without breathing in and without breathing out, and just feeling that place of no obligations, no responsibilities, just like a floating, whatever comes to mind for you for those 4 counts. And then exhaling for 8 counts, at least 2 counts more than what you inhaled. So we're going to do 6 in, hold 4, 8 out. And I'm just going to clap that. I want you to do it 1 or 2 times, and then I'm going to add something to it, and we'll all do it on our own, just to give you an idea what helps me. Simple, to the point. You can use it anytime you're starting to feel a little anxious or lose your center. Okay, so getting ready. Breathe in for 6. It'll be inhale, holding for 4, exhaling for 8. Ready, and. And hold. Exhale. Let your breath return to normal. Now this time, and counting it yourself, when you breathe in, and I like to give an affirmation as I breathe in, and my affirmation is, I'm breathing in light, life, energy, and possibilities. And on my exhale, I'm exhaling anything toxic getting in the way of my being centered or getting in the way of my progress. And say it any way you want, and you don't have to name that which is getting in the way. It could be fear, it could be anger, it could be whatever. You don't have to name it. All I have to say is anything that's getting in the way, anything toxic getting in the way. So now doing it on your own 2 or 3 times, we'll just be still while we all do the breathing just for a moment or 2. And then after the last round, let your breath return to normal. And now this time, as you breathe in, become aware of any part of your body that's beckoning to you. And release it, stretch it, move it, however you want to do. I just use the word stretch because that's just an image for me that works. So we're going to do that. You might want to, if you're sitting, stand. And so you're just going to breathe, and you don't have to worry about the count so much as allowing yourself to breathe and move whatever part of your body you're aware of. Now remember, there's no judgment here. I know you probably can't see my whole body now, and that's okay, as long as you are doing this on your own. So breathing in, allowing yourself to breathe, and at the same time, any part of your body that wants to move with the breath as you take it in, and then you're holding it, whatever that position might be, and then you're exhaling and releasing it. But you're going to release in a new position. You're not going to go back to where you were, because something wants to happen in your body differently as you breathe in again. I call it stretch. You can call it whatever you want to, holding it and then releasing. And would you continue this just for a minute or two on your own? And take one final position where you go beyond your boundaries. Take it beyond thought, beyond feeling, extending somewhere beyond. And give it a name, whatever it might be. Give it a name. And gently bring yourself back to center. Any way that's right for you at this moment. Feel your feet on the floor. Feel the release of everything going on in your body right now. Just letting go, being present without judgment. Okay, so that's just some of the things I've been doing to help me stay focused, calm, positive. And I will emphasize this positivity a lot, because the research has shown that the more positive you are, the more you strengthen your immune system. And I just want to do one final piece with all this. It's probably the same now worldwide that they've been told, do not go out without a mask. Well, I had one mask left over from the fires that we had, as you did in Australia, and I used it for a week, and it just started to become not usable anymore. I had to throw it away, and I thought, what am I going to do now? And I did the bandana thing, and it falls down, and I kept holding it up, and then if I was holding it up, it was hard to look for my groceries, and then I couldn't see, and I looked around my house. I said, I've got to have a mask here somewhere. And finally, I did. I found some more masks. I just want to show you, and why couldn't this work just as well? Hello, I'm fighting the coronavirus, and it's not going to touch me at all. I hope you laughed a little bit, because you know what? 1 minute of laughter strengthens the immune system for 24 hours. And 1 minute of anger, resentment, fear weakens the immune system for 4 to 5 hours. That's just something to think about. Okay. So finally now to the topic for today. All right. Going on to this teletherapy, possibilities and pitfalls. I looked up tele. I didn't really know what tele meant. It means far off or at a distance. So isn't that interesting? I mean, far off or at a distance? My heavens, haven't there been long distance healing for as long as there's been human beings on this planet? And don't any of us, well, I have, when I had a very serious life-threatening illness, I tried everything, including long-distance healing, because who knows what works? And that's in a way like prayer as well. Larry Dossey has written a book about prayer, and the final conclusion is nobody knows why prayer works, and it doesn't have to be any particular kind of prayer. But so interesting that now we're really jumping on this bandwagon for teletherapy or telehealing, but it's something that's been on our planet for, I'm sure, thousands of years. So anyway, just something to think about as long as we're thinking about everything else. I also want to say that this is a time of great healing. It's a great healing for ourselves and a great time of healing for the planet. And healing for me has always meant holding, bringing back parts and places of ourselves that maybe haven't been used, that need to be realigned, that need to be redefined or extended or developed. For myself, when I was confronted with a very serious life-threatening illness, I sat down and I thought about all the aspects of body, mind, spirit, and soul. And I knew immediately, just even without even going beyond thinking about it, that I had neglected my spiritual. So I did alternative healing for 3 years. And I went around the world and worked with all kinds of practices and all kinds of healers, including I went to Brazil and I did work with John of God several times. So there's something that we have to work on for this healing. And maybe this is our planet speaking to us. Maybe this is how this virus came about. I don't know, but it is a time of healing. So at any rate, let me talk about specifically the topic. I have so many things I do want to share with you. And I know you have many, many questions. I'm looking at my notes. So there's really 4 main areas that we have to consider when we talk about teletherapy or telehealing, working with our clients. The first area, of course, is the technical. And I'm not going to talk much about that today because that is not my area of expertise. And we're hoping soon in the near future to do a tutorial. I also am very aware that I've been getting all kinds of notices of tutorials that you can pick up on the internet or people are doing to help you get onto some kind of platform. Now, there's many, many platforms. The common one that most people are using, and now there turns out to be a few problems with it, are Zoom and Skype, and even the telephone, but that's the least good, so to speak, but it's doable. So there's technically getting set, knowing how to use it, and also making sure your clients have that as well. And I'll come back to that in just a moment. Then there's the legal. It's going to be different for us in each country, and I can't begin to talk to you about yours. What I did get one email from, I think it was on Facebook, from somebody in Australia who said it was linked to the kind of insurance you had. But that's something else that people could research and look at. They've loosened the HIPAA requirements in the United States, which are the confidentiality guidelines and so forth for working with clients. And they're making it much easier so that teletherapy becomes possible for people. So you need to check that out, and you need to make sure you're doing it correctly for your whatever organizations you belong to and how you belong to them, and they'll give you some guidelines there. Now there's the practical, and the practical goes without saying. How are you going to switch from, you've maybe had an office, you've had a space at maybe an institution where you've been working, to working, you're at home and your clients are at home. How do you help them make a safe space, a space where it will be confidential, where there's confidentiality, won't be broken, people will be walking in during the session, creating those kinds of boundaries, the privacy. And you have to adjust your contract with them in any way because of this working teletherapy. That's practical. I'm going to spend the rest of the time with little bits and pieces because, those of you that know me, I work very non-linearly on the clinical. And some of the pieces that come up for me clinically is what are our opportunities when we go from a 4-dimensional practice to what might be considered 2 dimensions, and even if we're working on the telephone, 1 dimension. And when I say 4 dimensions, body, mind, spirit, and soul, and we're in the space and energetically we're there, we're picking up cues and so forth. So what are some of the new elements that we're going to have to develop in ourselves if we haven't already? that helps us be in this space where we may not be thinking we're seeing or feeling everything. And we might be actually developing some of our other sensory apparatus more acutely than we might have thought. I say some of the questions that I've asked myself, and I'll share with you, are, is it even possible and viable to do treatment on this way, teletherapy, with Zoom or Skype or phone or whatever platform you have? And there's many platforms in the US, and I'm sure there's many platforms also developing in other parts of the world. I will say absolutely yes, as long as we are able to keep our own flexibility, which of course we are because we are dance movement therapists, being flexible and being open to the new normal, whatever it might be. And I really believe we're going to be enhancing our practices by doing this in some way. I don't know what all of the things we're going to discover yet are, but there's going to be a lot. Now, is teletherapy possible and viable for every group that we might work with? Now, some of you I know have been working for a long time, let's say with a children population, learning disabilities, or maybe emotional issues. Some of you have been working with dementia. A lot of people now are working with, I've just blocked it. It'll come back to me in a second. Some of the physical illnesses that we have. And is it possible? Well, this is the question you have to ask yourself. Are any of these populations able to work without you in the space with them? Now, I know from my many years of working with children, there's no way that a child population, regardless of what their diagnosis is, could work by themselves. They're going to need some kind of support. And then we have to then ask ourselves, what does that do to the actual ethos of the session, what I'm trying to accomplish with my client or clients? And is it possible to do a mini training for someone that might be there? Probably with the child, it's going to be the parent, because we're talking about being at home. Now, let me just bring in something else, which came up with some of the ADTA workshops that they did last week. As I said earlier today, some people are still having their positions at various institutions, whether it's state treatment centers or whether it's actually a residential treatment center, but everything has gone online, just like the universities and the schools, everything has gone online now. Well, can you work with everybody online? And that's going to be very different than your private work. For instance, if you've been working with a group of, let's say, normal urban neurotics, say 6 people, how are you going to keep the cohesiveness, in your private group when you've got them all over the state or the country or the world? Can you? How are you going to have to adjust? Now, maybe everybody still wants to work, and maybe it's just enough to check in once a week and see and talk to each other, and then maybe do their own specific dance, whatever it might be, and come back and talk about it. That might be enough. But these are some of the things we have to consider. That's very different than working with a group at an institution that still has these people that still can come for their treatment for whatever reason. How are you going to work with them? Can you work with them without an assistant in the room? And what are you going to do? Maybe you've always started with music. Maybe you've always started with props. These are the questions we're asking ourselves, and also asking, how do we make the adjustments, and can we? So when I ask you the question, is it viable? Is teletherapy viable for every population? It may not be right now, but it doesn't mean we can't find it and develop it. I want to say something too that I learned very early in my career when I first moved to New York, and I was having to invent things. There was really very few people doing what I was doing. And I had been asked at a particular special treatment center to work with this autistic child who nobody had been able to reach. The speech therapist, the psychologist, the special ed teachers, and they said, well, maybe you can reach him. And I hadn't had that much experience yet with autistic kids. And we were in this room together, and no matter what I did to try and engage him, being as creative as I could be, it didn't happen. And finally I just stopped and I looked at him, and he was quiet, And he kind of just looked at me. And at this moment when I'm saying, what in God's name am I going to do? I'm a complete failure. I might as well give this up and I might as well go back to my show business career. And at that moment, I look because the psychiatrist is looking through the door. There was like a window in the door. And I'm thinking, well, that's great. I'll be fired anyway. So it's out of my hands. So, I built up all this drama around the fact that the child and I were just looking at each other. And I went to my own therapy and I talked about it and said, I'm a failure. I don't know what I'm doing. And what should I do? And boo, about and on and on and on. And my therapist said, do you think you harmed that child in any way today? And I thought, I don't think so, no. He said, do you think you might have helped him in some way? And I thought, well, I don't know, maybe, because he was nice and still and he didn't scream and yell and we were just quiet together. And he said, so maybe treatment is going to be different than what you think it's going to be. And, that freed me, because it's true. You have to discover it. You have to be in the moment and you have to discover something new. Now you're all saying, yeah, well, of course we know that. Now you know it, but I didn't have I had no models then. I was having to develop this and find out on my own. And that's when we know, you have to be where your client is at that moment. And how is this going to change now? And how is it going to change when we know that they're dealing with the anxiety and the uncertainty as well? Does that then become just maintenance at this moment for anybody we're working with privately and or at the institutions? I don't know. And these, again, are thoughts, feelings, ideas that are coming up for me as we begin to switch to teletherapy. I will say that for me, I have been using Skype, Zoom, and phone. And I did this before this crisis when either the client had an injury or an illness and couldn't show up, and or I have one client now who only wants to be on the phone. And this is a whole other story. I can't talk more about this. But I've also had a couple other clients when we were having problems connecting and we had to do a phone session. And I realized that it's very powerful when you are just listening. Just listening, you hear so much more. There's no stimulation to, take your attention away. You're not pulling it all together. You're not being in the field and thinking about, okay, am I a magnet? I'm a bowl, I'm a container, where are they going? How am I moving them to the next level? You're listening and you're hearing where they're at. It's very powerful. So I have found the phone to be wonderful. I did question one of my clients this week who I saw, and I told her that I was doing this webinar, and she has been, we've done the phone a few times when we add a necessity, but most of the time it's Skype. And I said, what's the difference for you being, in our space, our regular space where we work in the office, and or Skyping or phone? She said, well, it's really interesting. She said, when we're in the office, I'm reading your body and your reactions, even though you're very still and you're listening and you're very intent. She said, sometimes I say something and I see something change in your breath and it switches me to another mode and I realize I've blocked something. She said, before you even say anything, she said, I miss that part. And she said, I know that she said, you meaning me, you see many things on my body when I'm talking and before we start to move, we always talk first and check in. And she said, I don't think you can see everything now. But she said, you're picking it up from what I'm saying to you and the voice. And she said, that's as powerful for me. She said, I don't feel I'm losing anything really. And then she just said as an aside, she said, I really think the Skype is probably more important for me and more viable than the phone. But, if you have to use the phone, it's better than nothing. And I was thinking about that, better than nothing. We talk about good enough mothering. I think we have to really realize that we're very skilled now, and it's going to be better than good enough. I think we're going to bring something to this that we're going to be able to add to the other psychotherapies as well, because we still are working in our minds four-dimensionally. All right, so let me look at a couple other points here. How do you think the therapeutic relationship is being impacted by this? Because we know after a bit of time, after trust is established, and regardless of your population, there has to be this strong therapeutic connection. You have to have this, the therapeutic relationship, or you can't do the work. So a lot of what I used to call pre-therapy is establishing the trust. You know, you show up on time, you have certain routines that you do, the client gets used to them, you have a lot of interventions, the less verbal, and we used to call them more primitive population, the more interventions you make. The more verbal, the more we're dealing with, say, the normal urban neurotic, the less interventions you make. You're really empowering the person. But I believe that what it's doing to the therapeutic relationship, it's strengthening it on some level, and it's allowing us to find new ways to help our clients become empowered. Whether we're working with a learning disabled child, an autistic child, a schizophrenic adult, an acting out adolescent, there's something about them having to make choices that they may not have to make during the session. That's something else to think about. So what is it doing to the therapeutic relationship? And how is it empowering our clients? Because I believe it is. I believe it is. I'm wondering too whether this general anxiety, which is kind of permeates the neighborhood, so to speak. And I would imagine if you're working with clients at home, if they're a parent and they're having to deal with their children, if it's a child and they're dealing with their parents' anxiety, it's there. Now, with some populations, we can't talk about it, but how are we going to handle it, incorporate it, get it organized, and maybe get it out of the field if we can? With normal urban neurotic, you can say, how are you feeling today? Have you been impacted by this virus in any way that you'd like to talk about? Where in your body do you feel it's affected you? Simple question. And it always stuns me with someone who's worked a lot in dance therapy with, let's say, me. They'll go, that's a great question. I'm thinking, it's not. It's really a simple question to myself. Very simple question. Where in your body? Yeah. And are we picking up those body cues? Now, can we have kinesthetic empathy? Can we have empathetic attunement when it's two-dimensional? Something to think about. Again, I don't have the answers to all these things, but these are some of the ideas that have come up for me. Let me just grab my notes. There's something that I heard and I wanted to share it with you. There's something very courageous about being vulnerable. And we can be vulnerable and our clients can be vulnerable. And that's maybe the first step towards courage. And courage is strength. And as we create this new being in the world, the new normal, so to speak, how do we release the grieving? We have to deal with it. It's loss. It's loss on a very profound level. And at the same time, many of us are having other losses. We're losing loved ones rapidly, or we've just lost a loved one, and we're having to deal with that kind of grief. Losing the job. I miss my guys. I learned so much from these incarcerated men. These are the men that have committed murder and rape and kidnapping, and they have life without parole, many of them. And they have just blossomed in the group. It's been extraordinary. I have learned from them, I'm sure, a lot more than they learned from me. Yes, I miss them. How deep is the grief? Well, I knew sometime I was going to be leaving anyway. This wasn't forever. But still, it's a loss. It's a loss of something very profound. But what's the positive for me? I don't have to commute 3 hours a day. That was exhausting. And across a mountain where sometimes it's snowing, it could be 80 degrees in LA, and it could be snowing across the mountain, and going to this desert and walking a tremendous amount of distance every day with my bad knee, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of things that are positive for me, but there's grief. Yeah. And yet I'm present for creating this new entity, whatever it might be. And how is this entity going to affect our practice? I'm just looking at the time. We do want to leave time for questions. The positives in all this is that we have this still, we care for our clients, and that's very important. We're communicating with them, and that's very important, just like we're going to be communicating with each other, and I think that's so important. You don't realize, I'm alone in my house with my cat, so I don't mean to insult her. She's my family right now. But some of us are really totally alone. And this connection in our dance therapy community is a wonderful connection because we feel that energetically. I do. So I know you must. So if I'm feeling that, then our clients must feel how much concern we have, the care, the connection, the continuity of care is very, very important. And discovering this new best innovative practices. Now, I will still have props even for my, my private clients, often will do an inspirational note. And I happen to pick this up, you've seen this, the dance first, think later. But it was my bookmark that I read. And it's so beautiful. And it says, a wise man does not always wait for the storm to pass, but learns to dance in the rain. And that's an old proverb. I know you've heard it before probably, but I thought, wow, isn't that true? Isn't that true? And then I did pick something for us for today. Let me see if I can find it quickly. I have all these inspirational books, and I do this with the guys in the prison. They love it. And this one today said, and I asked, what would help us, all of us today, in this coming together and connecting and discovering something new and supporting each other in this and being open to it and letting go of judgment. And this is what came up. Believe you can, and you're halfway there. Theodore Roosevelt. I thought that's nice. That's just right to the point. Let me just see if there's anything else here. The last big piece of this is that what if you get new referrals now? Now, how are you going to do your contract and your intake? How are you going to do all that? And is it doable? I think probably it is. And I know that in New York, based on what some of my friends have told me, people that are social workers, psychologists, people that have licenses in those areas are being asked if they are willing to work pro bono for the amount of people that are dealing with the, however they're being affected psychologically by the coronavirus. Now, that's something that's a pro bono, but you might get referrals from someone that said, my friend is really suffering and I know that working and moving could really help. Maybe that's when we have to be very directive again and just say, I can help you with some of this anxiety, some of this stress reduction, because we know that distress does weaken the immune system. And I keep coming back to that because it's really important that we keep it strong. So yes, I think there is a way we can work with a new client. It might have to be different than we're used to, and we might have to adjust how we see ourselves therapeutically. So maybe it's going to be more stress reduction, more introducing them to the ancient healing art of dance. And I know we don't need to be reminded, but I remind myself every darn day. This is the ancient healing art of dance. This is the oldest form of healing known to humankind. And when I was going around the world doing all the different kinds of healing and working shamanically for 15 years, the shamans I met worldwide all used dance still. Because you know what? It stimulates all of our sensory apparatus and our neurophysiological elements simultaneously. And it's the only therapy that does that. And remember, we can change things at a cellular level. That's very profound. So there's tons of reading, and we can't get into that right now, but you just have to keep remembering that this is a very powerful tool and technique. All right, let me see if there's anything final before, because there's a lot of questions I see that are coming up. There was one quote I had from a book I just read. Let's see if I have it here to find it fast. She said, when she dances, she was the sole ruler into a realm of open space and possibilities. And now we have all this time, and I'd like to call it time-space, because Jean Houston, one of my we were friends and colleagues, and she taught me so much. I remember her giving a directive one day, and she said, you have 1 minute. It was ever the process was. You have 1 minute to think of, do whatever. And 1 minute is equal to all the time in the universe. And when you think about it, it just expands your ability to be present. And when you think that we're only one of many billions of galaxies, many billions, and also that we renew, I think it's 300 billion new cells every day. So if that's happening in our body, on levels that we don't even know, because it's so minute, it's so microscopic, then of course we can change and we can create new possibilities. So I think I'll stop there. I think I've probably spoken long enough, and there's a lot of questions that have come up.
Oh, right. I've just been unmuted. So thank you, Marcia. That was wonderful. Lots of words of wisdom there and a lot of food for thought. We haven't had a lot of questions, just a couple of comments. One from Connor. Wow, that quote, "The carrier stuck in Guam," is a Theodore Roosevelt. Love the synchronicity. There's one quote. And
wait, I'm sorry. Could you say it again? I didn't hear what you said.
oh, wow, that quote, "The carrier stuck in Guam," is the Theodore Roosevelt. Love synchronicity.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. That's a very good point too, because I do play with those ideas all the time when there is synchronicity. When somebody says something, it was something you were thinking about that week somewhere else, and it's coming up now. And those are really important messages that we look at, because we are definitely opening up all of our sensory apparatus in a very profound way, in a different way. So thank you so much, Connor, for sharing that. That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Am I back on again?
Yes, you're on.
The other one from Eleanor De Palma. "Thank you for your words of wisdom. Feeling vulnerable during this time of change resonates for me. The learning curve of getting used to the technical aspects of using video conferencing or working with clients who only have a cell phone, not a computer. Perhaps that feeling of vulnerability is the very positive for us to begin a journey of building on what we have now to engage in fewer dimensions."
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, Eleanor, because I believe we're all feeling vulnerable. And vulnerability is the first step to change and to transformation. So it's important to acknowledge it and not to be stuck in it. Vulnerability is allowing us to have the courage to move on. Because once we admit, yeah, I'm feeling vulnerable and it's okay. And you too, as an expert, as a therapist, as years of training and experience, we're all vulnerable. And that's okay. And let's mold it together. Let's create its new space place together. And I think this just hearing and seeing or feeling each other is very powerful. Now, when it's only a telephone, it's still viable. As I say, I'm working with one client now only on the telephone, and I feel that we connect in a very deep way. And also, when I've had to work with other clients who would prefer to be Skyping or Zooming, I'm hearing things that I may not have heard before. So I'm always trying to look at the positive. I really am. And I don't mean that as a Pollyanna. I mean that I'm trying to extend my own awareness. I'm trying to change my own boundaries and not be afraid to go out of I don't call it comfort zone anymore. I call it my regular zone, because sometimes the zone we're in, the so-called comfort zone, is not very comfortable, but it's what's familiar to us. And it's getting into the unfamiliar, but that's how we unfold. That's David Bohm, the new physicist's work. We unfold into greater knowing, and we can keep unfolding till the day we die. It's like grow or die, George T. Lachlan's famous book, Grow or Die. Once we stop growing, that's it, it's over. And once we stop breathing, life is over. So let's keep that breath alive. And I from Latin, inspiration, it comes from Latin, and thank you, Angela, we talked about that, but it means to breathe. So when we're being inspired, we're breathing, and when we feel breath in us, it's inspiring us. So simple things, let's remember the simple things. And I definitely appreciate that. Just admitting our vulnerability is a big step. Sometimes I find that just becoming aware is the first step towards major healing, major change. And healing is change, transformation. Yeah.
Thanks, Marcia. One from Jane Refshogi. "Thank you, Marcia. How do you organise an online session in regard to the timeline of the 5-part session? with first introductory consultation, moving into initiating the dance. Do you ask clients to draw and show you their drawing and closure? From Jane.
Well, because this is all new, I don't have a model yet, but I think a lot about my 5-part session, and I come back to that. As those of you that have trained with me know that I use it as well, and I find it's extremely effective, and it gives you a starting place, a way to anchor what you're doing. So you're going to have to first get, for brand new clients, it sounds like you're talking about, first get familiar with them before you even jump in to the so-called session. You're going to be talking, you're going to be picking up cues, you're going to be finding out how familiar they are with moving themselves, finding out are they even comfortable with doing the drawings. You have to get a lot of information, and this is a great time to get it, to find out how it's very different, doing it this way, so-called two-dimensionally. What might it not give you that you're going to need? But I would slowly work my way into it, and I would also talk about what you do, because they came to you because they heard about you, so they know what you do. Now, I have people that come to me, they know I'm a dance movement therapist, and all they want to do is talk. And I have people that have never heard what I do, and suddenly they find a dance therapist. Wow, this is just apropos of something. I had to talk to an attorney the other day about something going on in my private world. And he said, "And what do you do?" I said, "I'm a dance therapist." He said, "What is that?" I said, "A dance therapist." He said, "You mean you dance?" And I explained to him what dance therapy was. He says, "Well, you know what?" He said, "I love dance, and I'm one of the happiest people you're ever going to meet. So I know that stuff must work." And I was cracking up. I thought, that's very funny. People are going to interpret it or organize it in the way that they can hear it. So, Jane, you're smart and you've done this before, but this is new for all of us. So I think that it's possible, but slowly. And you know what? We have all the time in the world now. We don't have to rush. All we have is time. All we have is time. It's beautiful. Or space, as Einstein would say. I don't know. I don't know if that even answers your question, but I hope it does a little bit. I hope.
So a question from Grace. Yeah. I am trained in pranic healing. Distance healing is part of the work. Disbelief can block the healing though. So if we cannot believe it is possible, try love. If we love the other, we hope, and in hope we believe.
And thank you, Grace. Are you talking about the disbelief coming from you or from the client?
Oh, both, she said, both. From the...
Well, from the research I did years ago when I was doing, research on long distance healing and prayer and all that, apparently it doesn't matter whether the person believes or not, if you're sending that love energy to them. So I thought that was kind of interesting because there's, I think, again, Larry Dossey gave some examples of people really resistant, and I'm not going to do any of that stuff, and there's mumbo jumbo, and they were getting all this coming from people from around whatever their country or whatever, and they were starting to heal, and that's when he started to look at the fact that does their belief system does it impact it, and he felt in that instance it didn't. Now that's something to really think about, and in love, they say love is the strongest energy, but the real problem for us is that in English we only have one word for love. And in the South, there's a South Sea culture that I think has 25 or 30 ways to describe love. We have love or we have like, but you don't love this funny little guy.
Calm down now. Don't stress. Take it easy.
The same way that you love your partner or your child. That's a different kind of love. Or you love to dance and you love chocolate ice cream. They're different. Maybe not so, but maybe, So that love energy is a real difficult one because it's not agreed upon, except that all the wise sages say that is the most healing energy we can do, is send unconditional love out to the world and to each other. But that's why we have to start with ourselves. Unconditional love for yourself, whatever's coming up for you now. If it's vulnerability, if it's fear, if whatever it is, love yourself. If you have to rest, if you have to read whatever you want to read it to recuperate. This is a rare time for all of us.
Thank you. Just to follow on from Mariana Souza, on this note, the sun still comes out, even
I'm
if
sorry.
everyone is. Oh, okay. On this
I'm-
note, the
Yes.
sun still comes out, even if everyone is asleep and misses the show. I believe that our intentions get to their destination regardless.
Yep, absolutely. I've always talked about intention from the very beginning. I was very influenced by Fred Alan Wolf, another new physicist, and he talks about the importance of intention and how when you have an intention and it's clear, the universe opens up in ways that you can never expect. And that's like Joseph Campbell's quote as well: "Follow your bliss, and doors will open that you could never in your mind think about." Yeah, intention is very important. And you know what? As they say, I think the Queen said it, but we've all been saying it, this too shall pass. Because the sun rises, the sun sets. The sun rises, the sun sets, except in 1 or 2 places in the world where the sun stays out for 6 months or 8 months and then it's dark for whatever. But pretty much that's what happens. There is a rhythm to our cosmos. And one of the powerful things about dance, besides connecting all of our neurophysiological, et cetera, cellular level, we can move in rhythm to our universes, to what's happening in the universe. When you get deep into that meditative state and you start to move, you're finding that rhythm and you're becoming one with these rhythms, which connects us again to something beyond ourselves. It's very, very important and very powerful. And we have a technique, a skill, and a method to do that. And please never forget it for yourself, as well as small doses for your clients, because, you know, they can only develop so far, so fast. But thank you for that. It was great. Yeah.
And just going back a bit, from Kylie Mottle, would you please repeat the statement that you say when you're breathing in? Was it light, life, positivity?
Yes. I'm breathing in light. I'm breathing in light, life, and possibilities. Light, life, and possibilities. Possibilities, right. And I'm exhaling anything toxic that may be interfering with my progress or my healing, whatever it is you want to say. Anything toxic, I'm releasing anything toxic getting in the way of my progress. And of course, as we're breathing out, the reason we breathe out a few counts longer than we breathe in is because we're getting rid of the carbon dioxide.
And from Suzanne Hurley, I love the idea of doing less and it being more, both with our clients and for ourselves right now.
Yes, and I totally agree with you. That's really important. And the other thing that came up, it came up once or twice with the American Dance Therapy Association's meetings, that it's very important to understand that clients and you may not be able to have your hour session or your whatever. I have one client now, she wants to work an hour and a half because we're going to be working less often because of whatever's going on. And sometimes that might be too much, for both of you, because it's a different kind of connecting. And the connection is so intense. Can we keep up that intensity for that amount of time? So less is sometimes more. And that quietness, like that I discovered with that autistic boy all those years ago, that stillness is very powerful. Yeah.
There's a question here, another one from Eleanor De Palma. How do you consider the space you are speaking from and the space the client is speaking from during teletherapy? Therapy taking place in healing places can have real positive effects. How does this play into the exchange of energy during teletherapy?
My feeling is that if you're going to do the teletherapy, you and your client have to figure out a way to make it a temenos, a sacred space. So how are you going to do that? The first one is make it's got to be safe from interruption to begin with. And then it has to be safe so you don't knock over anything. And you're going to work in the space you have. Now, some people I know in New York live in very small apartments. You're going to work in that. I have a client now, even in LA, has a very small space, but we figure out a way that this is now her workspace and she can do it. I don't have a big space here where I'm working. I have a house, but where my computer or where I can set up to get decent connection, there's not a lot of room. but I'm not going to do a lot of moving because I want my client to be moving. I make suggestions. I can see them. I might move a little bit. I'm going to pick up in some way, but you have to make it sacred yourself. So maybe you ask them to put something special in the space that feels right to them. Might be some flowers. It might be saging the space first. That's going to be between you and your client, but it's very, very important to create that safe space, safe psychologically, safe physically together, and make it sacred. Yeah. And your time together is sacred. You start on time, you end on time. Yeah.
Thank you. From Angela Castanis, as you said, continuity of care is paramount, keeping the therapeutic relationship alive.
Yep. I think that's probably most important. And I think your clients are going to appreciate it very much that you care enough to be meeting with them, that this is something that's going to be a stable in their life. And from this piece of stability, this seed that you're planting in this time of difficulty, it's going to grow something very beautiful. And that might be something that you even do draw about or dance about. It's going to be stretching you in your own creative processes and be non-judgmental with yourself, and always check it out with your client. It's going to be a beautiful two-way street, of course. And it's going to be a new kind of mutuality. It's going to be different. But I think we're going to, as I said several times, we're going to have something to contribute to the fields of psychotherapy from this. I know that.
From Jane Guthrie, I remember learning years ago that there is always a positive that can come from a negative. Thank you for pointing this out and making it easier to see in this situation.
Yeah, I learned that a long time ago as well, especially when I was, dealing with the life-threatening illness, that rather than say something is an obstacle or a problem, say it's a possibility. And it really makes a difference. And I would say 99.90% of the time, you can find something very strong in there. And listen, it works. It's one of these things that works if you work it. Yeah, it does. I found, I have this triangle that I created. Let me just show it to you. I drew it. It's my brilliant drawing here. Oh gosh, okay. So we have possibility, I don't know if you can see it, possibility, kindness, and gratitude. And those are three kinds of qualities of our beingness that we can actually practice. And all three, research has shown, help you stay strong and healthy. And all three actually release the endorphins, the feel-good hormones. And the feel-good hormones strengthen us as well, our healing processes. So positivity, we've talked a lot about. Kindness is doing something just like we're hearing all these amazing acts of kindness now. I heard one today, there's a group of medical students that they can't go to the clinic anymore. They're still in medical school, so they can't really do any of the work, and they can't go to the clinic. So this one young woman said what she did is she started a way so that all the medical students could sign up to say what they could do for the doctors, the nurses, the respiratory therapists who are working nonstop to help them in their homes. So they could babysit, they could shop, they could clean, whatever it was. And they've helped 100 families now. That's an act of kindness. They did it because they wanted to feel they had to do something. But when I teach this to the guys in the prison, their big deal is when they get their store, so-called. They have a little bit of money they can spend, if they have any money at all. So they buy soup and they buy chips and they buy things. And when someone new would come into the group, they say, "Are you new? Do you have anything?" Because often the new guys coming to the group wouldn't have any of their personal things, and it sometimes takes 6 weeks to catch up. So they're in a bare cell, nothing extra to eat, nothing extra to read. I would give them books. And they would say, "I'm going to pass you some soup, or I'm going to pass you some coffee," because they knew how it would feel to not have anything. That's an act of kindness done from the generosity of your heart. And then gratitude, there's been some research that talks about gratitude, and I think we all know about it. You must appreciate what you have, not mourn what you don't have. Even though I talked about grieving loss is different. Appreciate what you have. I mean, look what we all have. We have a place where inside, we have a bed to sleep on, we have food to eat, we are connecting now with each other. This is fantastic. This is fantastic. And if you can think of 5 things every day that you're grateful for, the research has shown it could take the longest 3 weeks to shift a whole consciousness in your own body, mind, spirit, and soul. So always be grateful for what you have, not for what you don't have. It's a big deal. They didn't have toilet paper. So what? So what? Figure something else out.
Thanks, Marcia. And from Jane, and this is something we can consider. Hi all, given the time constraints, could we schedule a second session where these questions and any further questions could be addressed?
Yeah, our plan was to meet weekly, so that for the dance therapy community, weekly to come together, always do something, a little bit of movement together, and then share what's going on, share what your needs are, or maybe you've discovered something, coming together and saying, well, I'm working at this institution and they want me to run my groups and this is what I'm finding difficulty, and together sharing that together, or sharing what new things you've discovered yourself. I know that we want to possibly, if we can, schedule a tutorial for how do you get set up on Zoom if you don't have it, because you're going to have to, if you're working privately, you're going to have to figure out what your client has. Skype is, of course, simple for both of you. Zoom is a little bit more complicated when you are becoming the host. So, but I think there's tutorials out there on the internet. I've seen lots and lots of stuff happening. So a lot of people are tuning into that. It's not I would say don't let the technical mess you up. The important thing is the relationship. The important thing is you being there for your client. The important thing is developing something together. And don't let the technical, make you feel that you're less than. Just say, okay, I'll learn this too. This too can be learned. So we're going to meet again, as far as I know, the small group of us are going to meet now from the IDTA to decide what next week's theme would be. And I guess we'll just send out an email blast again. But I think it's going to be a weekly at this time, I believe. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. We'll continue going weekly, and as you said, Karen will send out another email with what we're going to be doing next week.
So, is there a final question? I saw something from Virginia York.
Yeah, I'm loving the contact with Marcia as such a space holder for our learning. Is it possible to consider doing this each week if Marcia is willing? I am in some other learning groups where we are paying $10 per session to be in our community each week learning. And of course we can share amongst ourselves, but great to hold the weekly space. Yes.
Well, and, I'll definitely be here every week, but I would love to everybody have a chance to, also share, because I think it's very, very important. We want to keep empowering each other, but I intend to show up every week as long as I have the correct time.
Yeah, well, we won't change from now. And that was another thought we had, that if anybody out there, if you've, as Marcia was saying, has got a topic that you'd really like to share, please contact Karen and let her know, and we can make a schedule. Yeah. So thank you everyone for, did you want to say something, Marcia?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, thank you. I was very nervous about today because I'm not an expert on teletherapy, but I wanted to share with you things that have come up for me, and I hope it stimulated you, and I hope it, alleviates some of the fear. That is my real hope. And I had to also, take my own advice, not judge myself, which I tend to do a lot. And I'm also practicing the things I told you at the very beginning, simple things that I can do every day. Because this too shall pass. And, I just felt great just seeing at the beginning. I got to see some of you, and I haven't seen you or talked to you in a while. And it feels fantastic. It makes my heart sing. I feel like my cells are alive and happy now. They're singing. And I don't know if anybody else feels that way, but I certainly feel that way. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I certainly do, and it's given me lots of food for thought, and my imagination's going just with what I might be able to do with my populations. So thank you. It's been truly wonderful, and we'll all meet again, or some of us, next week at the same time, 10 o'clock, ongoing.
5 o'clock California, 8 o'clock New York.
Yeah, so get the time. zones right. Where maybe we could include perhaps on that, Karen, just the different, some of the time zones. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Maeve. Thank you, Angela. Really appreciate you guys' support in getting this. And we're going to stay and talk about some things, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.